Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bring Back Focus, a show where we discuss focus, attention management, and how all of that impacts growth and goal achievement. I'm very excited about today's episode because I have with me on a on show a very special guest. But before I introduce the guest, let me give you a backstory of how I stumbled upon him. So this was during pandemic. I mean, before pandemic, I've never worked virtually. I've never worked remotely. Sorry, I've always worked in the office. Uh, and then suddenly March 2020, world changes overnight. Not just for me, for everyone. But I had to work from home, and I'm not used to working remotely at all. As I said, I saw the impact of that on my work. I wasn't focused. I was not able to get anything done, and I was trying to figure out what is it that's missing. And I happened to read a book called Indistractable by Neil Dayal, where he talks about this service called Focusmate. Uh, and I'm like, okay, let me give it a try. Let me see what this is all about. And I try out a session. I'm like, yeah, this looks interesting. That was session number one, I believe, somewhere in April 2020. And today I have almost 800 sessions on Focusmate. It has completely changed the way I approach work and changed the way I look at focus and work management in general. And the guest that we have on the show today is the founder of Focusmate, uh, Taylor Jacobson. Taylor, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Taylor. So, Taylor, I mean, as I said, I'm a huge fan and a user of Focusmate. And, I think this show is about bringing focus back. Uh, so I would love to hear your journey of Focusmate. How did you think about Focusmate, and what led you to thinking of starting something like this?
Mm. Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for that great intro and for sharing your story, which I feel like is actually a good segue into my story, since it's about, your pain, your struggles. Yeah, I mean, there's probably two versions of the story that I could tell, right? Like, one is kind of the more like linear version of some of the things that I've done in my life, but I think just taking a step back, like the real story is just really over my whole life, always feeling the gap between who I felt like I could be or wanted to be and my experience of myself, day to day. And how just constantly disheartening that was, demoralizing. And I don't know, I guess I imagine that's a pretty universal experience. It's like the human experience. It's like, you watch some like inspirational video, let's say it's like a workout video, and you're like, yeah, I could totally look like that if I just blank, whatever.
Absolutely. Yep.
And, gosh, like that fantasy is just so constant. I feel like it isn't that hard, but it is hard. I think that's kind of the bottom line of my experience is just, it's so hard to be human. And especially I'd say my I'm sort of derailing off of the story, so to speak, a little bit. We can come back to it, but especially the last couple of years, have been hard in such new ways for me. And I've come to understand even distraction very differently as like, just this thing that we do because the pain of really being present is too much, like the pain of really facing ourselves and our lives. And so we've got all these really kind of deep grooves or deep habits around just avoiding that reality. And I think that's okay, actually. Like sometimes it is too much, and I think there's some real gentleness that we can bring to the ways that we distract ourselves. But it's also very painful to distract ourselves because what we're doing is just misaligned with, some deeper held truth about ourselves. Whether it's I am ashamed of my level of fitness and so I want to get stronger, or whether it's some deeper, true, self-loving, like I really just want to feel good in my body, and just that painful gap. So anyways, to kind of pull it back to the story, there was a very challenging year in my life, 2011-12. I left a job on bad terms. I didn't get fired, but I basically was sort of told, we need some big changes. You need to change roles at this company, or leave. And I couldn't stomach kind of staying there. And so I left. I didn't have anything else lined up. And it was just such a conspicuous failure. Like every other way I had failed, I perhaps was able to more easily distract myself or come up with an excuse or blame somebody else. But for whatever reason, this experience, it was just like, yeah, I couldn't do it. And there's some good reasons for that, some misalignment, let's say, between that job and what I really wanted. But at the end of the day, or I guess at that moment in time, what I was really present to was failure. And so there's a lot of shame that came with that. And then depression, really. And that was just so intense that I sort of already was interested in self-improvement and spent a lot of time learning, ways to improve myself, reading books, whatever. But that experience just catapulted that forward, where I was now in this rut that I needed to get out of. And so I just was really diving deep into learning whatever I could to help myself. And, there's just some points in that year or so where I just realized, like, this is what I want to spend my time learning about and thinking about. And how can I use my own desire to improve myself and my life to serve other people? And I didn't have a plan for how to do that, but I just thought, okay, I want this to be my career. That's all I know. I don't know how, and so, not so long after that, I stumbled on a life coach training program, and I joined that, and I learned a ton about personal development through that. And I started coaching, and I was in the process of working with one client in particular, actually, that he was just really struggling to follow through on something. And it's funny, I despite being a coach or whatever, I was working on a blog post at the time and just really putting it off, and I guess I just felt safe enough in that moment to tell him this fantasy. I had always had this fantasy of how I wanted to be supported. And so his name's Jake. And I was like, hey, Jake, I have this weird idea, but let me tell you about it and see if you're down to try this with me. And so I proposed to Jake that we get on a video call and just share exactly what we wanted to get done by the end of the call, and get really specific about it, and then literally hang out on the video call while we were working. And as we made progress, update each other, just be really honest, here's what's going on, and maybe check in periodically. And so Jake and I did that for a couple hours, and it really was like a miracle, Deepesh. Both of us were just really laughing at how jubilant we felt to just be so focused for 2 hours. We've never had this kind of experience,
Wow.
And it was just such a night and day kind of contrast, where neither of us had experienced anything anywhere close to that helpful before. And that spark was just wow, there have to be millions of people out there who are just like us that could use this experience, that could, have their lives changed by this experience. And that was the seed. And really from it just kind of grew this philosophy of like, if we just stop being ashamed of ourselves and just, I talked about like having this fantasy that I just never told anybody because it seemed ridiculous that I would need somebody to like babysit me while I was working. But if we just like let go of the shame and we just say, yeah, that's what I want, that's what would help me. And that's really our philosophy is like, how deeply can we reach into your life? How deeply can we support one another to just be who we want to be? Because at the end of the day, like that's all that matters, is you being the person you really want to be and not how you did it. That's just all ego.
Yep. No, Taylor, there are so many nuggets in there, right? Thank you so much for sharing that journey. And I like the way you went into the depth of it. Uh, I think I would definitely want to come back on a few points over there. One of the things that I really liked is how you described distractions. You know, basically the pain, you get distracted because you're too pained to be your current self at this point in time. And that's why distractions become so attractive because they take you away from your current self, and take you away from, that pain. I love that. Love that the way you interpret distractions because, we have, there is always this guilt associated that, I'm distracted, something is wrong with me, but it's not. It's very human to be distracted uh, by either some of your past or your future fantasies. I think that I really like the way you described that. The second thing, obviously, is, I mean, when you hear about Focusmate, when I tell people about Focusmate as well, it it seems too simple to be effective, right? Like it's like, okay, it is okay. I just turn on the camera and we sit with each other. But the amount of, I think, that accountability that it brings in, of that, you've decided to do something, you're on camera, and you you are going to go back and, talk to the other person that, you started with this, that's where you ended. It's again, it's too simple. It's so simple that it's, sometimes so profound. um and you I mean, I could imagine how you would feel when you do it for the first time and found it impactful. So when you saw that impact on yourself, how did you like how did you try going to other people, and what was that experience like when you told others about your experience? How did others react to that?
Yeah, well, at first it was just, I'm just going to keep doing this with my friend, and at the same time, my mind just started spinning with the possibilities for creating something out of this to reach more people. Um, so I guess I wouldn't say that I just went and told people about the experience. Instead, having tried various entrepreneurial endeavors, I kind of took that lens to it and I said, let me start running some experiments. And so what I actually did was I created a Facebook group, and I went into some other Facebook groups I was in where I thought there would be people like me who were working from home, working for themselves, like, alone, not a lot of accountability, that sort of thing. Freelancers, students. And I just posted and I said, hey, me and my friend have been experimenting with this thing. We call it virtual co-working. We basically just keep each other company and hold each other accountable on a video call. Would anybody be interested in trying this with us? And I just, sometimes I would put like a Google form and I'd say, if that sounds interesting to you, just like, can you answer a few questions for me about why? And I'll get back to you and send the info, or even just more simply, just invite them to the group. But, it's just the experience of sharing this very simple idea with people and letting them react. And and having it be strangers that were like, whoa, this sounds cool. I want to try it, and pretty soon having a Facebook group with, 50 people, 100 people, and just seeing the way those 50 or 100 people were enthusiastic. I mean, when we started, it was just, hey, post on the group. If you want to, you want to co-work with somebody, just post when you want to do it. They'll, other people will see it. They can coordinate a time with you and swap. We were using Skype initially. You can send your Skype ID. So it's just seeing, people do resonate with this solution.
Yep. No, I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I tried one, and then it worked, and I continued to be there. Now, again, go back to your story. It started with a low point in your life, in your career, and that is the time when you're most distracted, if you think about it, right? It when you're that low, it can lead to multiple things. One of them is determination, that I need to get out of this. One of them is just distraction, that okay, I don't like where I am, so let me distract myself now. And then there everything in between that spectrum. So how did you personally manage your focus at that point in time? What we're talking about focus, right? How did you personally manage to be on the better side of that spectrum, and get something productive out of that?
Well, I think it's an astute insight that there's some acuteness to those kind of moments where there is both more determination and perhaps more temptation to distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what can actually cause change is when the pain is so great that the distraction no longer really feels good. Or you have a hard time distracting yourself because you're so present to that, gnawing feeling. Or as I've kind of come to understand these kind of experiences more deeply, I think it's in part actually a feeling of not feeling safe, like not feeling okay, like your nervous system is in, when you feel anxiety or depression, it's actually, it's like a suppression of fight flight energy. So, you come out of an experience like leaving your job and feeling totally unmoored and no direction. The kind of primordial experience of that is, I'm not okay. I'm not safe. And that's not a mental experience. That's a very physical experience. Even though you might physically be safe, that's just how the kind of body mind works. So we probably try harder in some ways to distract ourselves, but are less successful. And so we are forced to, the determination just, it sort of grows out of the exhaustion with the pain. So it's a long preamble to say I was not successful at being focused at that time. And in fact, really the first stage that I went through in that year was giving myself permission to be unproductive, which was just beyond terrifying for me. Like so much of my identity was really tied up in productivity. How many hours I was working, my career before that was, I was a management consultant, and just, it really got kind of in my, and I won't blame management consulting for this. It's more of a societal thing, but it was like my self-worth was like, if I don't work 8 good hours a day, I'm not a valuable person. And it sounds silly now coming out of my mouth to say something like that. It might sound silly to hear it, but that's kind of how these subtle stories in our lives operate, is we don't actually name them. And that's why they have so much power over us, because they're just operating in the background. So I felt that tension, and I just felt it eating me up. And at some point I just kind of put my foot down with myself, and I just said, let go, man. Like, you got to just stop hurting yourself and accept that, where you're at is is, you're suffering right now, and just give yourself permission to not get anything done and see what happens, And I actually think that is a necessary step for us to really create healthy change too, because that's like the opposite of distraction. It's like, oh, this is what's real right now. That's an act of self-acceptance or self-love. And, it's tied back to the story about just naming the thing that I needed, with Jake. It's just kind of embracing the truth in that moment. So I can't really remember the rest of your question, but the short answer is I didn't succeed. But from there, I started to, from that place of accepting myself more, that becomes a healthier place to say, okay, now what's next? What's going to help move me forward? And I guess the synopsis on that story is I didn't figure it out quickly. I after I decided I was going to dedicate myself, my career to helping people get out of their own way and, be who they wanted to be, then that was just the game I was playing, was try different things. And I would say that I just struggled for a really long time. And it really wasn't until I guess just, found this technique that was a real unlock for me. And we can talk more about how I've come to understand like all the facets of that experience that are so powerful, because there's a lot there. And probably we should also just pause at some point and just tell your listeners like what is Focusmate in very simple language.
No, yes, absolutely.
But yeah, it took me a while.
I can, you said something that kind of answered a deep held question of mine. You kind of answered that. That distraction is a lot mental and physical. Like sometimes it's so deep rooted that you just can't, like, it's not easy there's no easy solution to that. I mean, I'll give you an example. That there's this one habit that I want to build, that I don't want to check my phone often, right? I mean, we all have that problem. My specific problem is I just unlock it for no reason. And I've been trying to work on that. And it's just somehow it's so deep rooted. I've made some progress, but it's so deep rooted. I sometimes feel bad that I push myself so hard to get over that. And it's you. I mean, the point that you mentioned, that you have to give yourself that permission to be unproductive, and that sometimes a lot of it is to do with your mental and physical states. I think that was a very profound answer. I mean, that was great.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would love to talk more about that actually, and we can even talk about your case around the phone, which is probably it's pretty universal. I'd say I have a similar experience. Yeah. What I said earlier, that depression and anxiety are actually masking. Depression is not a primary emotion, nor is anxiety, nor is guilt, nor is shame. Kind of the primary emotions are like anger and grief and this sort of thing. And when we're feeling anxious, it's basically because we're repressing something, or because we don't feel safe, right? There's sort of a body mind experience of I'm not safe. And so like going to your phone might be this very unconscious instinctual desire for connection, which is something that makes us feel safe, right? I know for me, I've deleted all the addictive apps, but I still have, I have a bunch of messenger apps on there. And when I'm opening my phone, that's kind of what I'm doing, is I'm like really hoping that somebody messaged me.
Yep, absolutely.
Because the deeper need is really like, gosh, I want to be like sitting, not to be like trite or something, but like sitting around a campfire with somebody, like, just feeling real deep intimacy. And I do think we can create that, on the phone or whatever. But I think just looking at it through that lens of like the human organism is not meant to be isolated. We need other people around us to feel safe. We're social animals. And so, if you're procrastinating a lot, if you're distracted a lot, you're checking your phone a lot. I think a lot of the sort of, advice we get is like remove the distracting apps and like create, like consequences or stuff like this, but we're not actually addressing the deep needs that we have as human beings that are making that distraction a persistent state. And there's something to the idea that like it's just a habit, and you can still perpetuate that habit even if your deeper needs are being met. There's something to that. But where I would always start is like, gosh, like what's missing from my life that I don't feel grounded, I don't feel safe. So yeah, we can dig into some of that stuff as well. But yeah, but maybe just before we go on, I know this is a non sequitur, but it'll probably be helpful context for people listening to just understand what Focusmate is. And we sort of alluded to it, but just to be concrete, Focusmate creates on demand the experience that I had with Jake, where you log on to Focusmate and any time of day or night, you can book an appointment where you just say that, I want to 10 minutes from now, I want to have a partner to keep me company and keep me accountable while I get things done. And currently you can work in either a 25-minute session or a 50-minute session. And you show up, you meet your partner, you share what you want to do, they share what they want to do. Oftentimes people will actually also write that down in the chat and chat it to their partner. And then you just get to work quietly, and you can check in and share progress if you want in the chat box. And then at the end, a bell goes off and you just check in with each other and you say, hey, how'd it go? And you have kind of another moment of connection there. And then you move on. And for a lot of people, it's okay, I'm going to take a little break and then start another session. Or, you just do one every morning to do your morning routine or something. But it's, what it is it's creating that human connection that helps us feel safe, slows us down, helps us be more present. Like just being with a person and talking to them and sharing your intention, it slows you down. It gets you more present. It's going to even slow down and change your breathing. Seeing somebody's, smile literally is just going to send messages to your brain that you're safe. And that changes your physiology so that you can focus. And then, of course, setting an intention that you immediately act on is extremely powerful as well. Pausing afterwards to reflect on how it went is extremely powerful as well. But, in a nutshell, that's what Focusmate is, just so people can have that context as we go deeper here.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, Taylor, I'll add my experience to that. Not only the community is incredibly supportive, people who are there on Focusmate. And not only that, like I initially thought you would think that this is for knowledge workers, and, a lot of them are knowledge workers, but you'll see people use Focusmate to even, start a timer, do their household chores, come back. You'll see people put the timer on, just meditate, do. So it's not just doing a task on a laptop, but just doing anything basically. It helps you stay focused on what you want to stay focused on. And I think that's what I find incredibly powerful about this. What I started doing, Taylor, initially I used to, sometimes I got distracted within the session. The sessions that I want to be really, really focused, I actually share my screen. And that is such a powerful thing, because you will never, whenever I do that, I never get distracted. I just make sure that my screen is shared on, and the other person, can see. I mean, they are doing their own thing, but just sharing that screen makes you feel very, very accountable. So yeah, definitely, for anyone out there, definitely try that out. And I can tell you that, based on my experience, it's just been a powerful tool. So Taylor, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for creating Focusmate, by the way.
Yeah, no, I thought that would be helpful. And I think you emphasize something really important about how did you say it's a welcoming community? I'm not sure, but you just
Wow,
how
it's a very
supportive.
warm, it's a very, yeah, very warm, supportive community. It's incredibly supportive.
And I think that's like the importance and impact of that is just impossible to overstate. And it's, more than anything, Focusmate's really about the culture of acceptance and support, because it's like if you were sharing your screen with somebody that you thought was going to be harsh with you or like judge you for anything, you really wouldn't be inclined to do that. But because there's this premise of like, hey, I'm your partner and I believe in you and I accept you no matter how much you're struggling to focus. I accept you. It's okay. And I'm here for the same reason. That premise just creates a lot of safety. And what it does is it just taps into your innate desire to be your best. You're like, I want to do this thing. So let me share my screen with this person who believes in me and isn't going to harsh on me. And so it just becomes this kind of upward spiraling experience. But yeah, I'm glad you kind of called that piece out.
Yep. And see, when you were building Focusmate, we'll come to points where I'm sure you obviously even today, but when you're building, you're faced with multiple priorities and challenges. What are some of the key challenges that you've had to overcome in this journey? And then we'll go into your focus. Yeah, how do you manage your focus and your system and those kind of things? But yeah, we want to talk about what are the kind of challenges that you had to overcome throughout this journey.
Yeah, well, you pointed out this one actually first, which is just it's probably funny to name this now post-COVID, but when I started it, just people thought this is really weird and crazy. And I think they probably thought that because it is sadly very counterculture to be open to this level of support, to basically raise your hand and be vulnerable and show up in a community that's it's about being there. It's about being deeply supported. And so, to be successful in a venture like that, it requires a lot of people to be vulnerable, right? That's an act of vulnerability to join a community like this, which I think is an act of courage. It's kind of a Brene Brown. It's like vulnerability is courage. But people would look at this, and I think, what they would say to me is like, people just won't do this. But I think what they were thinking on some deeper level is, I'm not brave enough to tell other people about my struggles, so I just don't believe that other people will want something like this. Like it's almost saying, I'd rather struggle and fail than admit that I need help, which that is very human. And so, initially as I was trying to raise money and, that sort of thing, I wasn't getting a lot of support or positive feedback, except every now and then there's just somebody that was like, holy shit, this is amazing, and they just got it. Right. So I think just feeling the massive life-changing impact and enthusiasm from the people that did join and did get it was what kind of helped overcome that. And then I'll share another really big obstacle was a couple years ago. We went out to raise money and we got a few term sheets, which means like an offer from firms to give us money and the kind of the legal terms surrounding that. And I just, in some sense, that's an obviously good thing. It's like, here's some money to pursue the dream. We believe in it. Let's do it. Let's go. And yet I just felt this like dissonance, and I didn't understand where the dissonance was coming from, but I kind of put off making the decision. And then finally I couldn't really get clear why I didn't want to do it, but I just kind of decided, like, it felt more liberating in my body to say no. And I was terrified to say no because I felt like I'd strung these people along, and I couldn't even really explain, why I was making that decision, but I just chose not to do it. And it took me over a year to actually unpack that decision and realized that kind of what my intuition was saying was that I wanted to build this company for the long term and didn't want to sign a contract with investors that it was basically a promise to say, hey, we're going to exit, we'll sell this company or go public within, 5 or 10 years, which I suppose could happen, but I just didn't want to make a promise to somebody that I wasn't sure that I could keep, without at least being very transparent with them about the risks. And I didn't have the awareness of that was what was going on with me at the time. And so and I can give more examples of that kind of inner turmoil of saying, why does my intuition say no to this? But man, that was an incredibly hard thing to just listen to that inner truth without fully, deeply understanding what was going on. I've had that experience around our staff, or our team members too, where we'll hire somebody that's just a phenomenally talented, caring, hardworking person. And yet there's some kind of friction that's can be very hard to analyze and describe. And yet it's like, you just feel your energy is drained in some way. That's like the leading indicator. It's just, you feel it, right? You feel some lack of alignment. And so those have been really, really big challenges to just own. This is the truth. This is where the sort of it feels more liberated to go in this direction. Let's do that. Yeah.
I think the point that you mentioned about rejecting investors' money at some point in time, and one of the things that you mentioned there was I recently read this book Rework by Jason Fried, Basecamp founders, and one of the things he mentions is, I think, that you're not building for an exit strategy, you're building for a commit strategy. Exit can happen, that can happen, but I think the point of committing to something and building that without really thinking of getting out, I think is I can now relate to those points as well. So no, and it can be incredibly difficult when you have that dissonance. When you're, I can imagine, right? You were pursuing something and suddenly when that comes to you, no, this is not something that I want to do now. Because there's some amount of guilt that comes along with that, you're probably letting the other person down, you're all of that, but then you do have to decide what feels right for you. And that those can be really, really tough decisions. So yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear how you were able to manage through all of that. I would like to dive deeper into your own focus strategy. One of the things I found very interesting, Taylor, was when I reached out to you and I said that, okay, can we get on 10 minutes call to discuss? You said, no, let's do it on the WhatsApp voice notes. And, I really like that because I haven't seen a lot of, people either just reject, okay, but you're like, okay, this is not the best way to do that. Why don't we use WhatsApp voice notes? And by the way, after that, I've started doing that. I think it just saves a lot of time. You do a WhatsApp voice note or just voice notes on any medium and convey your information without spending time on text or email or even Google Hangout or, Meet. So just talk about your routine and, how do you manage all of your priorities and what does your system look like?
Well, there's so many things we could touch on here. So maybe we'll touch on a few more higher level, almost like operating principles, and then we can hit on a few more tactical things too.
Yep.
I think the most important thing that I would want to underscore and just share with others is about thinking of your focus as a function of your nervous system and how grounded you feel, how calm you feel. Do you feel like you're always in a rush? Do you feel like you're behind? Do you feel overwhelmed or flustered? And that's it is a universal experience that we have because those are symptoms of fight flight. right? So if you just think about the nervous system as basically having three high level, states. One is where you feel what's called safe and social. This is when you feel safe, you're optimizing your body to socialize, to collaborate, to problem solve. Your blood flow is optimized to your brain, to your facial muscles, to your throat. When you talk, your voice is more sing-songy. And that's where you want to be. That's really where you need to be in order to be creative and focused. Because if you're in the next level down, which is either fight or flight, your body is optimizing to do something else, which is to fight or flee. So your blood flow is not optimized to your brain. Now it's in your spinal column and your limbs, and your digestion even is shutting down. And ideally, this is a short-term experience that's meant to help you, jump out of the way of traffic or something, or really actually to like run away from a lion. But the way that modern life is set up, we are in fight flight all the time. We are experiencing these triggers all the time. And so we're basically in fight flight all the time. We just don't think of it that way because we get so used to feeling stressed out. And then the level below that even is freeze. And that's where you experience overwhelm and depression. It's basically you can't even take action. You can't even move. Whereas fight flight is a very action oriented state, just not a very focused one. So just understanding that about ourselves, I think, is number one most important thing. And then learning the ways that are reliable for you to move up, whether you're in freeze and you're feeling depressed or overwhelmed, or you're in fight flight and you're feeling like you're in a huge rush, and it's basically a feeling of fear. What are the things that help you to move up into safe and social? And I think those things are actually pretty universal and obvious. But it's nature, it's moving your body, it's breathing more slowly, it's human connection and laughter and physical touch and meditation. I think meditation works just because basically you just sit still and you breathe slowly, and that activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the side of your nervous system that's slowing you down and saying, I'm safe. So just learning kind of your roadmap to feeling safe, and working those things into your schedule on a very regular basis, prioritizing those things. I think it's hard for us to actually have faith that if we prioritize those things, that there's like enough time left over to be productive, to get the things done. And my experience is that if you can get really calm, you can crush your work. But
absolutely, yep.
But a lot of us are never calm. I mean, we don't even know what it feels like, literally. So, I think people universally can discover that they can focus if they can feel safe. And that can be very hard. A lot of us have types of trauma. And some would say all of us have trauma. It's kind of a semantic thing. All of us got hurt in our childhood in different ways. Or later. So it can be tough. It can be a real lifelong process of learning to work with your nervous system and gradually find safety in your body. But that's been the most transformational lesson for me. And to me, it's why Focusmate works so well. And so that's number one. Let's say number two is just use Focusmate. That's a good hack. Yeah, then I'll give a couple more tactical things too. Mm-hmm. This might feel like an abrupt shift from that conversation, but
no, that was, by the way, that was an amazing strategy overall, right? And I think sometimes when you don't have answer to why you are distracted, I think that's the framework. You are in the fight of flight. We just don't know. And then a lot of times we are in the freeze zone as well, where we are completely just don't want to be here types. So no, I think that was a very great, that was an amazing insight.
Yeah. And, like if I told you about my daily routines, which I don't always do in the morning, but I, it's dynamic. Right now, one of my daily routines is I check in with a friend, my friend Henrique, and
Mm-hmm.
we really just kind of like check in. We share what's going on in the last
Mm-hmm.
24 hours, how we're feeling. Um, but both of us have gone through, major struggles over the last year. And we just found, it really helps our bodies to show up in this space and to just share open-heartedly, vulnerably, and feel really connected to another person, which has been so hard since the pandemic. And like, I think we have no idea how much that is impacting us. I think it is astronomically more than, I mean, we do. And I think we don't. And so I've just finally realized, like, I really need this in order to function anywhere close to my best. And so I don't, I don't think I've ever heard of a morning routine that involves an hour-long call to just check in with a friend. But, it just comes back to, whoa, this is what my nervous system needs. And that's been transformative. And, and then, the rest of my, I call it my daily routine because I often do it in the afternoon. I do some breath work. I do some stretching and some yoga that's specifically around releasing, I feel that, not I feel, based on what I've studied and learned, trauma is stored as tension in our bodies, so fight, flight can also be released through kind of intuitive movement to help release tension that you feel. So I do a lot of yoga, to feel into my body, where are those areas of tension, and give them some attention and see if I can open that up. Yeah, those are, I think, some of the important things. I do some like calisthenics as well to just get my breath going a little bit, open up my lungs a little bit. My anxiety has been much higher since COVID, and so I can feel the constriction in my rib cage, just from that muscle tension, that fight flight. So it's very important for me to do some, get my heart rate up a little bit and stretch that out and open my lungs up, and that all helps me feel grounded. So yeah, maybe I'll pause there. Lots more that we could get into, but
No, I think so. It's been such an amazing conversation, this one, Taylor. Is because this is not one of those conversations where there are 15 ways to improve your focus or those clickbaity titles, 10 ways to you. I think we've spoken about focus and productivity at such a deep level that doesn't often get spoken about. We've gone like multiple levels inside the root cause. Okay, why do we get distracted? Why we get distracted? Because we are not at ease with ourselves. Why are we not at ease with ourselves? Because so I think we've gone like 5 or 6 layers below, and that's a very you generally don't. I mean, generally it's like, okay, you do this, do that, keep your phone away. Sure, I mean, that's I know that we have to do that, but I'm not able to do that. So why? And I think that is what would be the biggest takeaway from this particular, this episode is just how do you control focus at a deeper level, like much deeper than what anyone thinks about. So no, but so that's why I love your routine, because you spoke about those elements. If you have those sorted, then you can have strategies to manage tactical.
right.
Um, and I think, and one question that I always ask my guests is, what is your relationship with your phone right now? And that's a very important question for me. And I think we all have different levels of relationship with our cell phones. How do you describe your relationship with your phone?
It's okay. Yeah, like I pick up my phone a lot. Um, I pick it up a lot, and it's sort of that impulse happens faster than the self-awareness of what I really need. And sometimes it takes me 10 minutes or 2 hours or 2 days, honestly, to actually feel what I really need, and you just go into some spiral where you're feeling something, and what high level, you might just be feeling depressed, or you might just be feeling anxious, but that's not the real thing. That's not the real need, so, that's why it's very hard or impossible to break these habits around our cell phones, is because we're not meeting the real need for what I believe is just safety, feeling grounded in your body. So, I've removed addictive, what I believe are like classically addictive apps. But then there's things that I think people would say have addictive qualities, like email or messenger, different messengers, that if they're addictive, it's because they're conduit, and actually even the quote unquote bad guys, they're addictive. They're all addictive because they're conduits, I think, for connection, sometimes entertainment, Netflix, maybe some sort of indirect feeling of connection, but maybe that's more entertainment. But, yeah, I open up my messenger apps and I flip through those, and I'll send some messages, which I think is okay. It's like, I want to create some more connections, so let me send some messages. So yeah, it's okay. And I'm trying to just be gentler with myself about what it is and focus on the things that I think matter, which is, all the stuff we've talked about, and say, you know what, this is going to take care of itself and it's going to be fine.
Absolutely. Taylor, this was an amazing discussion. Thank you so much for being on the show. Before we wrap the call, how can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah. And thanks, Deepesh. It's been awesome. Yeah. So if you want to check out Focusmate, our website is focusmate.com, focusmate.com. It's free to join Focusmate. And if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. You could just look for Taylor Jacobson and you'll find me, and I'm happy to connect with you there.
All right. And I would end this note with, please try Focusmate. Trust me, it will change it will. And again, I say it with all my passion. It's just, I've seen an improvement, and when something impacts you, I do talk about that a lot. So thank you for being on the show, Taylor. I really appreciate your insights and all the conversation that we've had. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks, Deepesh. My pleasure.